Can I please speak to the manager of the record label? Thank you. Good morrow, my impossible princes and princesses. Welcome to another edition of Kylie Retrospectives, a series in which we look into the discography of the legendary Miss Kylie Minogue in the lead up to her album Disco, which comes out on the 6th of November 2020 at the time of recording. I am Elixia Q Valentine, Malvern's answer to Samantha Mumba. This week we are tackling one of the most interesting albums in Kylie's career, an album that was completely different from anything she'd ever done at that point, an album that divided critics across the world, and an album that almost caused the end of her career. We are of course talking about Impossible Princess, also known as Kylie Minogue. That's right, last week's episode was about Kylie Minogue, wasn't it? We'll get into that shortly. This album received quite the staggered release. It was meant to be released in the UK on the 22nd of September 1997, but we didn't actually get it until the 23rd of March 1998. It had a staggered release elsewhere across the world, first released in Japan in October 1997, and then in Australia January of 1998, and then eventually it made its way everywhere else. Like I said, it was originally due to be released in September of 1997. However, due to the tragic death of Diana, Princess of Wales, the album's release was delayed. Because of the title Impossible Princess, there was some concern that it might be a bit insensitive and inappropriate, which I can understand. Subsequently, the album's release was delayed, and the title was actually changed to Kylie Minogue, like the last album was. But that was only in the UK's release, and Kylie at the time said the title would still be Impossible Princess, it just wouldn't be on the actual release itself. Today's look I'm inspired by the album's overall vibe. I love the colour scheme. Thought I'd go for a nice mint and purple combination. I'm also wearing an outfit that my mother made as well. I'm also wearing like a jumpsuit as well. It's like a harem trouser. It's so comfy. I'm probably just going to wear this all the time. This album as a whole was quite a radical departure for Kylie. She did styles of music that she's never done before and never done since. She really experimented. And I mean this in the best way possible, but the album's sound is all over the place. There's a bit of indie, there's some alternative, there's quite a bit of techno, there's some sort of trip hop, there's ambient. It's all a little bit confusing, but it's a very interesting listen. Impossible Princess was quite a divisive album when it was released as well. Some critics loved it, other critics hated it. I believe it was NME magazine rated the album a 4 out of 10 and said that this style of Kylie was fraudulent, which I think is a bit unfair. Kylie fits that bracket of pop stars, often gets criticised by the types who like their music to be really authentic, criticised for not writing her own songs, being manufactured pop as they call it. And so then it kind of just makes me laugh to think that this is an album in which Kylie did take a lot of creative control and then she gets labelled fraudulent for it. Like, make up your mind. Kylie co-wrote every song on this album, and it was the only album to hold that accolade until 2018's Golden, so for a whole 21 years later. And subsequently, this album has some of her most interesting lyrics ever. So let's talk about the actual music itself. I know normally I do the singles first and then I talk about the rest of the album tracks and B-sides, but I think this time I'm just going to go from tracks 1 to 12 and then the B-sides at the end. Don't know why, I just feel like doing it differently today. The singles we had from Impossible Princess were Some Kind of Bliss, Did It Again, and Breathe, none of which entered the top 10. And that makes this album to be the first Kylie album to not have any top 10 singles on it. The lead single, Some Kind of Bliss, only managed to reach 22, and then the follow-up singles reached number 14. We also had Cowboy Style, which was a single that I think was released exclusively in Australia. It didn't get released in the UK. So, on to track 1, we have Too Far. Now, like I said earlier, the album's styles are a bit all over the place. So expect the general vibe as we go through the track listing to be, you know, ooh, it's like the deeper shade of blue color. Immediately with this first track, we are met with a song that is completely different. Too Far starts off as a brooding type of track. The intro is quite suspenseful. It feels like some shit's about to go down. Kylie then sings the first verse in a very frantic, fast manner, singing about her fears, her anxieties, the kind of material we've never heard from her before. A piano comes in and it sounds very sinister. Then it kicks into an up-tempo dance track and it becomes very frantic. It very much sets the tone and lets us know that we're not in for your average Kylie album. Within the song's like first 10 seconds, it's clear that the girl who was singing I Should Be So Lucky all those years ago is gone. We have entered into a new phase, a new era. Then we have track 2, which is Cowboy Style. Like I said before, Cowboy Style was a limited single. Its music video is my least favourite type of music video, where it's just a compilation of live clips. This was at the tail end of the album campaign. I can't imagine the budget was that high, so I'll let it slide. And also in 32 years, this is the first of 2 times she's done that, so we let it slide. Ellie Goulding, take notes. Because she loves those kind of videos, doesn't she? Looking at you, Miss Goulding. Cowboy Style is a bit of an interesting one because it kind of fuses a sort of like Celtic kind of sound with a bit of a sort of Middle Eastern sound as well. She's singing about sort of like the fear and excitement that this new man in her life is giving. At the time she was going out with a photographer called Stefan something. I don't want to try and pronounce his last name because I'll probably get it wrong, but it's a French last name. He was the one who shot this gorgeous album cover as well. The lyric, peace and terror all in one, is like, she is scared, but it's also very exciting as well. Cowboy Style has a great breakdown as well, for instead of a middle 8, which I always enjoy when that comes along. The shame Cowboy Style doesn't really get referenced on tour. It was done on the Fever tour a few years later, but as far as Kylie's singles goes, it's definitely one of the more obscure. Then up next we have track 3, which was the lead single, Some Kind of Bliss, which was done with James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preaching. Some Kind of Bliss was a lead single, and I think it kind of gave a bit of a wrong impression as to what the rest of the album was going to sound like. This song very much has the mid to late 90s Britpop indie kind of sound, and I like Some Kind of Bliss. I'm not entirely convinced it suits Kylie, and I don't think the general public will be convinced either, given that it reached number 22 in the charts. The lyrics of Some Kind of Bliss are quite positive and they're quite happy. You know, she's singing about how every day is some kind of bliss. She's in love with this guy. The tune's a little bit like, I would say miserable sounding, but if you were just listening to the song and not the lyrics, you would think it was a sad song. It's kind of like the opposite of what Kylie used to do, you know, when she used to do the really up-tempo, perky songs with very sad lyrics. This is the opposite of that. And as track 4, we've got Did It Again, which was the album's second single. It reached number 14 on the chart as well. Did It Again sort of has this sort of alternative kind of sound as well. It's a bit of like an existential crisis song. She's singing to herself and telling herself off, basically. The video is fantastic as well. One of my favourite Kylie videos ever. It's definitely in my top 5. Where there's 4 different versions of Kylie fighting each other. You've got indie Kylie, sex Kylie, cute Kylie, and dance Kylie. They're all dressed in like the stylings that she had done in her career thus far. She's very much like playing up to like the stereotype of what that image is as well. And they're all fighting each other for supremacy. And it's funny. She's taking the piss out of herself, which I really appreciate. I always sort of wondered as well if she was to do Did It Again, and have 4 different versions of Kylie fighting each other, what kind there would be. Then we have track 5, which is Breathe. This was the 3rd single released over here in March 1998. The album version is very slow and sort of ambient, and it was sped up for its single release. The vibe is still the same. There's lyrics about sort of having patience and knowing where you're going in life. Breathe is definitely a song that's helped me out many times, actually. You know, when you're feeling a little bit sort of panicky and nervous and anxious, Breathe has definitely been a song that has helped calm me down at times. At moments in my life as well when I've been in this situation where I haven't been particularly happy, Breathe has been like a song to sort of listen to be like, yeah, it won't be long, not for long. I definitely recommend listening to Breathe if you are feeling a little bit anxious, especially with the state of the world at the moment. Up next we have Say Hey, which is another sort of ambient kind of chill out song. It has got a bit of a beat to it that kicks in. It's very sort of subdued and very much less is more kind of song. It's very nice actually. A lot of critics at the time thought it sounded quite like a Bjork song, like she was trying to be Bjork maybe. Then we got track 7, which is Drunk. Drunk is one of my favourites on this album. It has that same brooding vibe that Too Far has. Starts off with some deep sounding strings and then it eventually goes into a dance track again. It would sound actually quite at home on Madonna's Ray of Light. She has the lyrics, "I'm not happy, drunk till I'm drunk until you take all of me." It's definitely one of my favourite songs from this album. Then we've got I Don't Need Anyone, which is another Manic Street Preachers collab. Out of the two of those, this is probably my favourite one. Again, it feels very indie Britpop of the mid to late 90s. I think I read that it's actually like 4 different song ideas that were just put into one, which is kind of why the lyrics don't make a huge amount of sense to me. I Don't Need Anyone is considerably more up-tempo than what Some Kind of Bliss was. Then we have track 9, which we've taken it down again. A song called Jump. A song that shares its title with the Pointer Sisters hit, but is incredibly different in terms of its vibe. Jump is very chill, again, it's very slow. I really love the lyrics to Jump, where she's singing about how she has all these feelings and she's basically saying, let me have them. If I want to develop, if I want to do this, if I want to make this mistake, let me do it. I'm eager, I'm ready, it only hurts sometimes. I run to the future and jump. Very relatable content again for me. Reminds me quite a bit of how I sort of felt before I left my hometown. So I've always got a soft spot for Jump, I really like it. Then we have track 10, which is Limbo, which, you guessed it, we're going from the nice ambient chill out straight into the frantic again. Limbo is quite full on. It's one of my favourite tracks though on the album. It's quite techno with some sort of elements of rock in it as well. There's some very frantic and panicky sort of lyrics. Even one of the lyrics I'm finding it hard to contain myself. All I can do is avoid my mind. It's quite existential again and it's quite a bit like... I think I remember reading somewhere that Limbo was in talks to be the first single from the album, but they decided against it because they thought it might have been a bit too jarring. Which I understand because, like I said, Limbo is quite frantic. So it may have been quite jarring from the perspective of, you know, wanting a song that's going to be played on radio. But then Some Kind of Bliss is also very jarring. Like, if I was a long-term Kylie fan at that point, I probably would have been like, what's this? When that song came out. Whereas I think Limbo is a little bit more in touch with what she had done before. Vaguely. Not really, actually. I think I just prefer Limbo as a track. Then we've got track 11, which is another change of pace. We've gone from the frantic Limbo all the way back down to the nice sort of chilled out vibes of Through the Years. Through the Years is a bit more understated. It's got some very good lyrics as well. One of the lyrics I really like is, "You blinded me with all your light, I wish I could see now." Another lyric I like is, "I pity all the pretensions of you." Ooh, you tell him. Yeah, the vibe is very much like reflecting on a former flame who isn't as good as you thought he was. And then lastly, in terms of album tracks, we have Dreams. Dreams is where the title Impossible Princess comes from. Although also the title Impossible Princess came from a book of poetry that Kylie was given called Poems to Break the Hearts of Impossible Princesses. Dreams sings about a woman who wants to have it all, and basically every line in the verses is a contradiction of each other. So like, to have every man but to love only one, to fly in the ocean, to swim in the skies, etc. Makes for a nice track, and a very good album closer as well. Going on to the B-sides, we have Love Takes Over Me, which was another brooding kind of number. Only this one doesn't get into a frantic style. This kind of stays the same style throughout. We have Tears, which is more of the sort of techno dance variety. Tears is very good and it was included on Hits Plus as well as a B-side that did it again. I think also Tears was a Japanese bonus track as well. You can see why it wasn't included on the main body of the album, because one of the lines is "never want to say I never needed anyone," which completely contradicts one of the earlier tracks called I Don't Need Anyone. And those were the only 2 B-sides we had. However, Impossible Princess got a re-release in 2003, like the last album did, and it featured a song called This Girl, which is also on Hits Plus. This Girl's a nice stripped back ballad. It's almost acoustic, singing about, well, being herself really. Lyrics that I've always related to actually as well, you know, I'm not interested in fitting in, I'm not interested in giving in, I only want to be this girl. And I'm like, That's me to a T. And so Impossible Princess, as you may have gathered, is a very chaotic mixed bag of styles and songs. I like Impossible Princess. I enjoy it. I always sort of never really know how I feel about it as a whole until I listen to it, because it is just so what? Like, you listen to one song on the album and it isn't representative of what the rest of it sounds like at all. It's not cohesive at all, yet somehow it manages to work. It's very strange like that. I just want to take a moment as well to talk about the visuals. Like, I love this album cover. I really love it. I love the visuals, you know. I love this. Sadly, Impossible Princess wasn't a huge commercial success. I was 6 years old when this album came out in the UK. So it's the first album that I am old enough to remember, but I don't remember it because it wasn't that big. It reached number 10 in the UK albums chart, which is good. It managed to reach top 10, but it did become her lowest selling studio album ever. And as far as I'm aware, nothing has since claimed that title. And Impossible Princess sort of joins the leagues of Let's Get To It. In the case that it doesn't really get referenced on tour very often, it gets left out compilations quite a lot. There isn't really any signature hits on this album. I think the closest you have to that is Breathe, probably. I think the reaction to the album was harsh. Nowadays, in retrospective, people prefer the album a lot more and it does get better reviews, but at the time, some of the reviews were quite scathing. Kylie herself even considered quitting music after releasing it because of how it was received. And I just think it's a shame, because this album is very good. It has its flaws and it isn't perfect, but I think that's almost what is good about it. It's Impossible Princess. It could be Imperfect Princess, Memoirs of an Imperfect Angel. She did tour this album though, with the Intimate in Live tour, which was her first concert tour in 6 years. And the tour did very well. It's very small scale and it wasn't going to come to the UK, but there was a demand for it. I recently watched Intimate in Live actually, on DVD, and it's quite strange to watch a Kylie concert without like spinning around or can't get it out of my head. Obviously because this tour came before those songs, it's just surreal. I think it's just quite strange to see Kylie, this worldwide global megastar who's known for really extravagant gigs, doing such a smaller scale. After Impossible Princess was wrapped up, she left the record company Deconstruction and signed to Parlophone to begin the next chapter of her career, and things definitely went on the up from there, which we will discuss next week, of course. But yeah, all in all, Impossible Princess, confusing as it might be, it's definitely an album worth listening to, and it's an important part of Kylie's career. She released nothing like it beforehand, and she's released nothing like it since, so it's quite unique. So that brings us to the end of another riveting ElliXia's Kylie Retrospectives. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment if you liked it, don't leave a comment if you didn't like it, share it with your friends, your family, do what you gotta do. I've been ElliXia Q Valentine, and don't forget to tune in next week when we will be discussing the comeback album of the century, Light Years. Don't forget to stay safe and be kind to yourself, look after yourself, and until next time, I've been ElliXia Q Valentine, and please book me. Mwah.